Good afternoon. Today is April 11th, 2016. My name is Aaliyah Santos and I'm a student here at Salem State University. Today I will be interviewing a veteran of the U.S. Army, Sergeant Dakota Hopper. So, I heard that you were born in Danvers, but you went to high school in Beverly. Where exactly did you grow up in the time between there?
I was born in Danvers, yes, but when I was 2 weeks old, I actually moved to Arizona. And yeah, moved to Arizona where my dad was working as a correctional officer. And then I grew up in Arizona all the way till I was 9 or 10 years old. And then we moved to Beverly, where my mom's family's all at. And then from 9 to 18 I was going to Beverly High School, Memorial Middle School, and all the Beverly schools down there.
What was it like in Arizona?
Very hot. No, it was interesting. I actually miss Arizona because it's completely different than it is here in New England. Where we lived, it was all desert. That's all we had. Like our backyard was just desert, and you know how you see like movies where you see like tumbleweeds. We had those, and we lived in Flagstaff, Arizona, and it was just all desert. And it was nice living there because you could walk everywhere and not have to worry about like getting hit by a car or something like that, like you have to here where there's roads everywhere. So the difference going from Arizona to Massachusetts was kind of a cultural shock within the country.
You just had to worry about getting hit by tumbleweeds.
Yeah, exactly.
So would you say you liked it there better? Would you ever go back?
I would love to go back. I would love to move back to Arizona. I hate the cold. I hate the cold. When I got injured, my back is just extremely sensitive to cold now. So I try to stay towards like the warmer parts of the country now.
I understand that. So when you were growing up in Arizona, and even when you came back up here to Massachusetts, did you have any general idea of what you wanted to be when you were older?
For the longest time, I actually wanted to be a fighter pilot. My uncle, who is in the Air Force, he was a fighter pilot. And he used to come visit us in Arizona every now and then and tell us like stories about him flying planes and stuff like that. And I've always been like extremely interested in flying planes and try and go in that route. But it was always a toss-up between being a professional football player and a fighter pilot. And military-wise, it just turned out to be that way.
So you'd say that your family was a major influence on you?
Oh, definitely. My family is, I have a very, very large family, but they are very tight-knit. And even though they live all over the country, they always stay in contact, and they generally have a pretty good influence on everything you do within the family, yeah.
So, both your uncles and your father had ended up serving in the military, right? Can you talk about that?
Yeah, well, I have 6 uncles and 7 aunts. 1 aunt served in the military. Of the 6 uncles, 4 served in the military. My dad served in the Marine Corps in Vietnam. I have an uncle that's an engineer in the Army. I have the uncle who was a captain, I believe, in the Air Force who was fighting fighter jets. And my dad he was I don't know the Marine Corps rank. He's a sergeant or a staff sergeant, whatever it is, in the Marine Corps in Vietnam. So being in the military, we have a very military family-oriented way we run our family. Regardless of how you try to escape the military, somebody else in our family is some way associated with the military. So my dad, he pushed for me when I wanted to, first started looking into the military. He's like, oh, go for it, it's awesome, I love the military. But the military in Vietnam was a little bit different than the military is today. My dad, he was a big supporter of me going into the military. My mom, she wanted me to have nothing part of the military because she knew all my uncles were in the military, Coast Guard, Marines, everything. She didn't want any of her sons going into the armed forces at all.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Makes some sentiments of sense. So, would you say that was your finalized decision to serve, or did something else finally give you the decision, this is what I'm going to do?
Honestly, what the biggest thing that kind of pushed me over the edge to serving was I was working as a Taekwondo instructor in Beverly, and that was just right around the time where like the economy was going to crap, and my master ended up having to fire 3 instructors, and I was the lead instructor for teaching children between the ages of 2 to 8, and he had to cut back. So when I got fired, I had nothing, and I was right out of high school. You know, I didn't know what to do with myself, and so I started looking at other jobs. I'd worked at like, you know, minimum paying crap jobs and stuff like that I was just not happy. And then my older brother had actually just joined the Army a year before I did, and I contacted him. We went down to El Paso, Texas to see him before he went on his first deployment to Iraq, and he kind of was just like, if you really you're not sure what you want to do and you're working all these jobs that you hate working and you're not making great money, he goes, the military is always an option. And he sat me down for like an hour, and he just talked to me about like the fraternity that you feel, like the group, the camaraderie you feel with being in the Army. And I was always kind of looking for that. And he kind of pushed me to like, all right, go see a recruiter. And then I went and saw the recruiter, and then a whole bunch of stuff happened with the recruiter. He got in trouble, and then they took him away, and then they moved him to another state. So originally I was supposed to actually join the Marine Corps like my dad, but my recruiter, he got in trouble, got sent to like Maine or something like that, and the Marine Corps just never worked out for me. So the next thing was I wanted to join the Army, and my recruiter, he was very good at trying to get me what I wanted in the Army, because they couldn't do that. You can't do that in the Marine Corps. So having my brother, my recruiter, and my dad just all kind of saying, you know, the Army is not, you know, a bad place. It's a good thing to do. It kind of pushed me to actually go down that road.
Would you say that you would have preferred the Marine Corps or the Army, though?
Hindsight, the Army. Only reason I wanted to go in the Marine Corps was because my dad. My dad was a Marine, and that's the only reason I wanted to go into it. Oh, my dad's a Marine, I gotta be just like my dad. But I look back from where I am today, and honestly, without going into the Army, I probably would not be where I am today without joining the Army.
Okay, so on the topic of the Army, you ended up going from trying to be in the Marines to ending up in the Army after major drama. So when you finally did get in, where did you do your training?
I left Massachusetts on January 4th, 2010, and I went to Fort Benning, Georgia, where that's the home of the infantry school. Or it's not the home of the infantry anymore, but anybody who's going into the infantry, they call it OSUT, which is one station unit training. They take all the infantry guys, they stick you in a 15-week intensive course on basic training, which is 9 weeks, and then they go into specialty training, which is infantry tactics and maneuverability and stuff like that. I was at Fort Benning for 16 weeks, I think, before I finally got sent to my duty station in Germany.
What was it like there?
In Georgia?
Yep.
Oh, I thought it was gonna be amazing because it was hot. You know, it's the South. It's amazing. And it rained every day. It snowed twice while I was in Georgia, which I didn't know was even possible. And basic training, the design of basic training is to literally break you down of who you are and build you back up to what you have the potential to be. So they try and strip you of all your, like, you know, the mindset of being a civilian. They try to strip you from like being an individual, and they try to build your confidence back up to being, you know, a team player, because in the Army everybody has to work together. You cannot work as a single unit or a single person, and it just will not work. So they build this mentality of you have to work as a team, and in infantry school they teach you to be the most badass walking the face of the planet. That's the mindset they instill in you. because you have to have that mentality when going into battle. You can't just be like, oh, I'm not feeling it today, guys. No, you have to have the mindset of, I am a badass. So Fort Benning was not fun the first time I went there. It was not fun. Looking back on it, it was a breeze compared to the other stuff I've done in my life. But
You said the first time, so does that mean you went back?
oh yes, I ended up going back again after I was stationed in Germany. Went to Afghanistan, came back. But before I went to Afghanistan, I went to sniper school, which is also based in Fort Benning. And sniper school was 7 weeks long, and that school is just nothing but a mind fuck. They just play games with your mind all the time. And it's that was the second time I'd gone to Fort Benning, and I thought, I'll never have to go to Fort Benning ever again. And then after I got back from Afghanistan and PCS'd from Germany to Fort Benning, so I was stuck at Fort Benning for another 2 years, where that's where I was stationed before finally getting out of the Army. So Fort Benning is like a black hole. It just keeps sucking you in, no matter how far away you try to get away.
You went from an action hero to being just like some Twilight Zone-esque character
exactly.
to just being absorbed into a black hole.
Yes, exactly.
So you spoke about ending up going into Germany. What did you do there?
The majority of the time I spent in Germany was training, because when I first got to Germany, our unit had just been activated to go to Afghanistan. So before a unit gets activated, you have to spend a certain amount of time training to prove to the commanders that your unit is ready to go to Afghanistan. So when I first got to Germany, I spent 9 months out in the field in Hohensfield in Grafenwehr, Germany, training out in the snow. Many nights sleeping in the snow. many nights just freezing my nuts off, just wishing I was somewhere like Arizona. Germany, I actually loved Germany. Germany is a great place to live. When we weren't training, I was going out I saw Paris. I probably saw about 70% of Europe while being stationed in Germany. Granted, it was only for like 1 or 2 days, so I didn't get to get the full experience of each country. But it was actually pretty cool being in Germany and then going and seeing the rest of Europe. But when I wasn't training, I was, we were out in the middle of northern nowhere Germany, so we didn't have anything near us. But Germany was great, minus the cold, where I think they have 2 warm months of the year, at least in the part of Germany I was at, and it was terrible.
Was it colder than here?
That is actually the coldest I've ever been, was Germany. Like negative 25, wind chill of like 70. It was terrible. And it only furthered my hatred for the cold. And then when I moved back to Massachusetts, I was like, I can't deal with this this rain and this cold. I can't do it. So, but Germany was actually great. I would love to go back and visit Germany anytime.
So from Germany, you ended up going to Afghanistan. Where exactly did you go there?
I was in Kunduz province, which is northern Afghanistan. A lot of the majority of the fighting you hear is in like the south and the eastern Afghanistan, because those are like the Taliban hot spots. But in the north, you're mostly fighting Taliban that is like dealing with drugs, because they all come from Tajikistan, I think it is, from the north. I can't remember the country, but we'd sit on the border right there and just watch like the drug trucks come in, and we couldn't do anything about it. So we were trying to fight the Taliban's their money supply, try to cut off the money supply to the Taliban, while also trying to bolster the Afghanistan police and the military force, because they are not well trained at all. And we would spend months just training them how to fight, how to act, how to maneuver, how to deal with certain situations. So we were there mainly for teaching the police and the army, more than we were just to fight the Taliban and reestablish the government and stuff like that.
Would you say you enjoyed that more, the training? That's hard work.
I think that what I miss most about Afghanistan is the bonding you have with the other guys, because you're stuck in a tent with another guy for 12 months, and you know what I did in the army, what I did in Afghanistan. I was in a very small group, so there was only 8 of us, as opposed to other groups that have like 50 people. So the 8 of us got to know each other very well, and we became very tight knit. So I think what I miss most about Afghanistan is just the camaraderie and like the group being together as a group. I don't miss Afghanistan one bit. That's one thing I just never want to experience ever again.
Well, so was there anything difficult about being deployed to Germany, to Georgia, to Afghanistan, to Germany and Georgia again?
I think the hardest part of being deployed to Afghanistan was the communication. We were on a combat outpost that we didn't have internet for the first 7 months that we were there. So talking to relatives, talking to loved ones was almost impossible. The only way we could do that was through like snail mail. That was it. And that takes forever, especially when you're in Afghanistan in an APO. I think that was the hardest part, other than getting acclimatized to the weather and like dealing with the cultural barrier between the Western culture and the Middle East. People don't realize that the cultural barrier between the two is so like it's very big, and just the slightest thing that seems normal to the Western part of the world could be completely offensive to somebody in the Middle East. So dealing with that and getting used to their culture, just not being able to talk to your loved ones, I think is the hardest part though of being in Afghanistan. Firefights and stuff like that, you just become it sounds bad, but you go on autopilot almost. It just becomes part of the normal day, normal routine of spending a year in Afghanistan.
So usually when we think of a cultural barrier, the first thing we think of is language.
Yes.
Because language is heavily tied to culture.
Yeah.
Was that a major part, or was there other things about that cultural barrier?
There's many things about the cultural barrier. You take, it's stupid, but you take like a 5-hour course a crash course on their language, and it doesn't help. It doesn't help. You mispronunciate a word, and it turns out to be another word that might be offensive, and like it's just better to just let the translator that we have just do all the talking for us, because we make ourselves look stupid. But no, there's the women in Afghanistan are heavily oppressed, and you're not even allowed to like glance, look at them, even though they're wearing their burqas. You can't look at them at all. Like the only thing you can see is their feet, and then just looking at their feet is like a death threat to them. It's bad. Their driving is. I wish I could show you videos I took while I was in Afghanistan. The videos of the Afghanis driving is interesting. There's no set laws. They don't have driving laws. They don't have rules of driving left side, right side of the roads. There's nothing like that. Their cultural is, if you're in the way, I'm either going to run you off the road, or I'm going to go around you doing like 50 miles an hour to get where I need to go. It seems like a very Boston like rush kind of type area where everybody's in a rush to get places, but it always seems like when they get there, they're like, oh, slow moving now. The culture there it's completely different. The things you see in like textbooks and like on TV and stuff like that, they don't even compare to what you actually see when you're actually there. It's completely different.
I'd imagine something like Rome, like all those pictures where everyone's like stuck in a traffic jam.
Yes, exactly.
That's what
but
I
with
would
lots
imagine.
and lots of dirt roads.
Oh no. Just get stuck. So, would you say your favorite part about deployment ended up being the camaraderie, or was there something else that you found that you genuinely enjoyed?
I actually, the part I miss the most is definitely the camaraderie, but I actually miss like getting to know Afghani people, because like what I did in the military as a sniper, I didn't get to interact with the locals a lot. We were always off doing our own thing in groups of like 4 people, excuse me. And so the times that I did get to actually sit down and like, you know, have a one-on-one conversation with like a local who spoke broken English, I actually enjoyed that because I felt like, you know, I was making a difference to like teach him like, hey, you know, we're not here to, you know, rape and pillage your entire country and turn it on its head and, you know, put in democracy because democracy is, you know, winning world. You know, I was there, you know, to teach them like, you know, we're here for your benefit. You know, I'm not here to try and, you know, destroy your way of life. I have no interest in doing that. I wanted to better understand the Afghanis' way of living so it would better reflect my personal opinion about them. Because when I went into Afghanistan, you hear all the, oh, they're dirty, they're ugly, they're stupid people. Don't listen to any of that. The Afghani people are very intelligent and they're extremely smart and they know what's going on within their country. So I think talking to them helped my own opinion about them, and that really, I actually thoroughly enjoyed talking to the Afghanis.
So would you say that a cultural understanding of each other is necessary in a war?
Absolutely, because most people, how do I word that? I think most people, when they see that people go over to Afghanistan, they think we're just over there for oil and whatever money reasons. But to truly understand why we're there, you have to understand their culture. And for them to accept us into their country and to accept us to help them, they have to understand the Western's culture of being world police.
That's definitely become part of our culture at this point.
Yes.
So the people, the camaraderie, those were your favorite parts.
Yes.
Now, what was your least favorite part, aside from snail mail?
The worst part, there's so many. The hottest,
list?
yes. The hottest I've ever been, it was Afghanistan. It was 124 degrees during the summer. And like at night it was like 111. Like you couldn't sleep. Like we didn't have ACs in our tents. We had just built this cop and this fob, and there was nothing like any sort of electrical, like that you could plug in something and not have the worry of, you know, it blowing up in your face. The heat. I was injured in Afghanistan, so I definitely didn't like that. I think the part that I hated the most was probably the perception that people of the Afghanis had of Americans, because the people that had the 10th Mountain that was there before us, they didn't have there's a big thing in the military called the hearts and minds, to win the hearts and minds of the people. Rather than getting in firefights and shooting them, you show them that, you know, compassion, and show them that, you know, you're there to help. The group before us didn't do that, so it kind of screwed us when we got there. And so the Afghanis were constantly like attacking us and fighting us because they thought, oh, all Americans were, you know, terrible, the devil and all that stuff. Oh. So they were constantly, you know, fighting us because they thought we were bad people. And I think that's what really sucked about Afghanistan, because that wasn't our job.
That seems like agonizing to think about.
It is, because no matter what you do, they already have a preconception of what you are as a person.
It seems like there was a giant miscommunication just on what both of you thought, because you going in with one mindset and them coming in with their own mindset. So that goes right back to the cultural aspect.
Yes.
But on the topic of, you've mentioned that you were injured there several times. Yeah. Can you elaborate on that?
I was in parts of Afghanistan that I am not allowed to talk about because security reasons. But we were doing things in parts of Afghanistan that we weren't technically allowed to be there. We were working under a different government, technically. So the whole situation is not even on record, but from my own accounts, I was blown up twice, and I have 2 ruptured discs and a slip disc, or 2 slip discs and a ruptured disc, whatever the combination is, I don't even know anymore, in my back. And so I haven't been able to do most things that I've enjoyed most of my life anymore because of that. And I think other than the other things, that was definitely the worst part of Afghanistan, was getting injured.
I would say I would have expected that to be above
It's
the climate,
definitely up there.
but apparently it's below the climate.
Yeah.
So when you were on base and you were around all of your fellow soldiers and such, you explained deeply how much you enjoyed being around them. You enjoyed the communication, the camaraderie that you had with them. What was your favorite thing to do with them while on base, while not?
They love soccer. They love soccer. And you don't need to speak the language to know that when they want to play soccer. They had a soccer ball, and we would go to the translators' tents and stuff like that, and we would just get a soccer game started up with them. We would play it's out in the desert with rocks and stuff like that, but that was those moments were like the true moments where you realize that, like, we're all just people, you know, regardless of what culture we come from, regardless of what language we speak. People are coming together to play, you know, a world-loved game of soccer. And I think that really, you know, made our ties with the Afghani people, because there would be times where there'd be like 8-year-old kids that usually wander outside our base and like stuff like that, because you throw candy at them or something like that, you give them candy. And we would go get clearance from higher ups to be like, hey, can we bring these kids in to, you know, play a soccer game with us? And then they, you know, grab a few of the kids, and then we bring them inside, and we just play soccer for an hour, 2 hours. And they love that. They like, that was their favorite pastime. And I definitely enjoyed playing soccer with the people when I didn't have, when I wasn't working. Yeah.
So would you say that playing games and such like that and having conversations, that it helped mend some type of relationship between the U.S. soldiers that were there with you and the people that you were around?
I would say it did, because I felt like by inviting these kids over to, you know, to play soccer with us, I feel like they would go and tell like their parents and the other kids and stuff like that, like, hey, we were on an American base today playing soccer with a bunch of soldiers. We had a whole bunch of fun. And I feel like, you know, when I first got to Afghanistan, I didn't like the idea of hearts and minds. That didn't work for me. I was like, I'm not here to try and be compassionate to these people, you know, that's not who I am. But towards the end of my deployment, I started to learn that, you know, showing that compassion, even though such a small thing as playing soccer, it turns out to work in the end game, because they go tell their parents, they go tell these other people, like, hey, the Americans aren't that bad. You know, and that in return ends up helping us out, because maybe it's less attacks coming the summer months. Maybe it's, you know, less something or another from a small group of Taliban. Things like that, I think, make big impacts on future, you know, generations that come through Afghanistan, because that's the big thing, is these kids are going to be the next generation of Afghanistan. And if they grow up thinking, you know, oh, the Western culture is terrible, it's just going to create more fighters for them and stuff like that. So if we can change their minds at a young age, you know, maybe it'll change things.
And that's a very important viewpoint.
Yeah.
So we've talked about several things now, and we've talked about your friendships, we've talked about just the feelings that you've had while there. What was the most important friendship that you had? Do you still have any with the people that you were with?
Yes, there is one of my best friends that I was in the Army, Jonathan Carmody. He's in California. He's going to school now too. When I first got to Germany, I didn't know anybody, and he kind of took me in, and like, he'd been there for a few months before I got there, and he took me in and he kind of showed me the ropes. And we shared a lot of the same interests. So we became very close friends. And then we deployed to Afghanistan together. dealt with all that fun stuff together, and then came back, and then we went our separate ways. Excuse me. And still to this day, I talk to him at least once every week, 2 weeks, because that was one friendship that I always like truly cherished as a person. And there's a lot of other friends, like my friend Chris Hunter. He's always been a very good friend of mine. He's always been there for me too. So that was one thing I took away from the Army, was the friendship of the like feeling of brotherhood. Like, these guys are my brothers, and I will do anything for them. So I definitely took away a few very close friends.
You expanded your family.
Yes, exactly.
You're already a large family.
Across the country now.
So you're a sergeant, and I feel like that's one of the only things we haven't touched on, because we've touched
yes.
We've touched on your feelings there, we've touched on your friends, we've touched on the people you've interacted with. We haven't touched on your ranking, your responsibilities of it, how you became such.
It was not fun. No, getting to sergeant wasn't. It takes a lot to become an NCO, a non-commissioned officer. A non-commissioned officer is a person that's in charge of the people of lower ranks. So being a specialist, which is an E4 in Afghanistan, I wasn't in charge of anybody. My job was just to, be behind the sniper rifle and watch other people and stuff like that. When you become an NCO, you're put into a role where you have to look at it this way. The choices you make will directly affect the people under you. So my choices and my decisions are literally life or death with the people that I'm personally responsible of. So when you become an NCO, it's a very big thing, because you have to be a certain type of person to be put into a leadership position such as that. The basic way you get to sergeant is you do all these stupid online correspondence courses. It's just red tape, and it just basically shows, I'm competent. And then you go in front of a board of all these top-ranking people in your unit, sergeant majors, first sergeants, all these people that have been in for 20-something plus years, and they drill you with questions. They ask you questions about like the NCO creed, things you have to memorize. What would you do in this situation? It's a little bit different for the infantry, because they question you like, let's say you're getting flanked from this side and something happens. What would you do in this situation? And you have to try and give how you would react to that situation. And based on that drilling of questions from those higher ups, they dismiss you from the board, and you don't even know if you passed the board. You sit there like till the end of the day, and then they come out with a list and they say you either pass the board or you don't. And if you pass the board, that means you're in line to become sergeant. They do promotions once a month, and then as long as you meet the minimum requirement points, which goes back to doing those stupid correspondence courses, you get promotion points for doing that. As long as you meet points, then you get promoted then. So your fate kind of really lies within the higher ups in trusting that you are a competent person who can be put in charge of other people's lives.
It seems like some type of schoolwork just like will always be present in your life.
Yes, I spent I think 80 hours doing correspondence courses to completely max that out, and then you get points for like Afghanistan. You get points for being in Afghanistan. You get points for like different ribbons you have. Scoring high on PT tests, you get a lot of points for that. Scoring expert in marksmanship, you get a lot of points for that too. So you have to be a well-rounded person to become an NCO.
Would you say it was difficult on you?
It was very difficult, especially when points were so high, because in the infantry points are rather low compared to other people, but it takes a lot of effort to be put into a position such as an NCO like that, yeah.
And so once you were finally in the position, how did you feel, and what was it like when you were finally like, okay, this is what I am?
You know, before I became an NCO, I had this idea. I was like, I'm gonna become a sergeant, and it's gonna be amazing, and I'm gonna feel like I'm gonna be Captain America with a cape flying in the wind. And then I got pinned to sergeant. I was like, I don't feel any different. just the rules change. Like you can't go hang out with the privates out in the barracks and stuff like that. You can't hang out with stuff like that because I forget the article. NCOs can't hang out with people like that on off hours. So just stupid little rules like that change, but I honestly didn't feel any different. I thought I was like, I'm gonna be a leader. It's gonna be amazing. And then the next day when I came into work, all right, Sergeant Hopper. Okay, so my name changed. That's the only thing.
So did it basically feel like going from 8th grade in middle school to 9th grade where there was no real difference?
Pretty much. Until you get into the higher ranks, there's really no difference. Other than, hey, now I'm in charge of 5 people. My personal responsibility is these 5 people. That's about it.
Would you say you had more time or less time with leisure?
As a
sergeant versus before?
I definitely had less time as a sergeant because when I got to Georgia, that's when I first got med board. I started the medical process. So I was a specialist for a year and a half before I finally became an NCO. So I was only an NCO for a few months before I decided that I was like, I can't do this anymore because of my back. So then I got medically discharged from the Army. So I didn't have the full NCO experience that most people have, but it really didn't feel like
it's kind of crash course.
Yeah.
All that work. So what would you say you miss the most about being in the Army?
The camaraderie. In the Army you do a lot of stupid stuff. Go cut the grass with a pair of scissors. Go there's like a ½ inch of ice on the ground. Oh, go melt it with a blow dryer. You do a lot of stupid things for no reason because they have nothing else for you to do. But I definitely miss the people. That's the one thing I truly miss about the Army is just the people. I don't miss the dumb things and waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning to go run 8 miles. I don't miss that at all. But the people is just feeling in a place where you feel accepted because everybody's the same. It's almost, I don't want to say it's almost like being in a gang because it's nothing like that, but it's the same as wanting that exception from a group of people. You get into a group, you become so close with these guys, and then it's just like, and then when everybody leaves, it's just kind of like, now what?
Go find something else.
Exactly.
Well, so you missed the camaraderie and you came off because of medical reasons, but if it wasn't for the medical reasons, would you have remained?
Yes, I would have stayed in. I probably would have changed my job. I really was pushing. I started a packet to become a helicopter pilot, actually, while I was in Afghanistan, because you have to have recommendations from other people. Like I have my uncle who's a captain, who's a fighter pilot, and I was talking to a few other of the warrant officers who were on our base who were flying helicopters. I really wanted to become a helicopter pilot, so I was pushing for that. So if I ended up staying in, I probably would have gone to flight school and tried to become I really wanted to become an Apache helicopter pilot. That was my dream in Afghanistan.
Your dreams got slaughtered.
Yes.
So we've talked a lot about what would be considered the hardest part of being deployed and the hardest part about training and the hardest part of just being over there. But there's a different side of it known as a cost. Mm-hmm. What do you feel like was the biggest cost on your own part about being over there?
My health. I think that's honestly it, because if I had never gone over there, I'd still be able to run, play football, do taekwondo and stuff like that. I can't do anything I love doing anymore because of that. So I think the ultimate cost was my own health. It ended up making me get out of the Army and come to school, and now I'm doing something I enjoy doing. And I wouldn't be able to do that without the Army, but I sometimes question the cost I paid for going to Afghanistan with my own health and never being able to do anything ever again.
So would you say that's a regret?
Yes, it's yes and no, because I had no control over the situation. So I can't really regret going there. It's more of a regret of like a self-guilt of getting hurt or putting myself in a situation of getting hurt.
So, transitioning from being in the military for years and then back into civilian life. You talked about how in training, how they broke you down from who you were to be able to be a nice, cooperative soldier. What was it like in the reverse direction?
Honestly, it was not easy. There's a lot of things you have to get used to doing again when going from the military back into civilian life. You go from a very structured life. At this time you have to do this, be here, do this, do that. The way life is in the Army is structured. So going from that to just being able to do whatever I want, you know, not having to worry about waking up at 6 o'clock in the morning anymore to go run. I think that's the hardest part, is trying to figure out, like, because in the military you're constantly go, do. And then your mind becomes trained to do that. And so going from your mind constantly having to be stimulated to constantly doing something to doing nothing, it's really taxing mentally to try and figure out the transition from military back into civilian.
So would any of that have had an influence on you deciding to go to college?
Yes, because I was working when I got out of the Army. I originally started working at Lockheed Martin. And I loved that job. I loved it. But the times with deciding to go to school and going to work at Lockheed conflicted. But I wasn't mentally stimulated at Lockheed. I was doing the same mundane thing every day, walking back and forth. It was tiring. And so I was actually scared to death. Like, I've seen combat, I've seen things, but coming to school terrified me, because being 24 years old, 25 years old, and then going into a classroom with a bunch of 18-year-old kids who are right out of high school, who have the knowledge fresh in their mind, but I completely forgot like 99% of the stuff I learned in high school. It's weird that that little thing terrifies you, as opposed to seeing gunfire and stuff like that. So I was scared shitless, honestly, coming to school.
And would you say that difference between these 18-year-old fresh out of high school people and you being in your mid-20s was the hardest part about going to school, or is there anything else that was difficult?
I think dealing with the 18-year-old kids was difficult, because I'm used to you see kids, 18-year-old kids sitting on their phones in class and stuff like that. And if you're in the military, you would have gotten torn apart for doing that. I would have got yelled at, I'd be running, I'd be doing all sorts of stuff. So seeing them do that, and me being an NCO, I was getting frustrated in class, because I was in class to learn. I wanted to try and absorb as much information from the professor as humanly possible. And I see these 18-year-old kids just completely blowing off class, ignoring class, doing this, and I'm like, this is driving me nuts. But I think the hardest part of going to school was connecting with people. And I think that's why with the veteran community, the First Step program, I can't remember the name of it is, but that program truly helped me transition into school, because the classes are all veterans. These are all people who understand you. These are all people who know what you're going through. And it kind of helps ease you into the process. Going from those classes to classes where it's just like like kids who just, you know, don't care. They're here because mommy and daddy are paying for school. It's hard to relate to these people, and that was the problem I was having, was I couldn't make friends with other people because I wasn't accepting them as 18-year-old kids.
So would you say that's a similar to how you went in and you had a set mindset about the Afghani people? Would you say it's a similar situation?
That's actually a very good point. Yes, I would say that. Yeah, they couldn't relate to us. That's a good point. I would say that. I didn't even think about it like that. Yes.
Pre-comparing. So the veteran community was something that was incredibly important to you at college and coming to college. Would you say that was the most helpful thing for you? Were any professors genuinely like your biggest help? Because you're in criminal justice,
yes,
and you have a bachelor's for that. And so, forensics? So many questions on that one.
Yes, actually, Professor Darian was a huge influence on me staying in school, because I actually talked to, I think of that group of people, I think there was 8 or 9 of us in that class, 4 of them have dropped out. That's 50% of the people have stayed in school. I think it's professors like that that truly, you know, want you to learn. Like when I was in Professor Darian's class, I was a computer science major. I didn't know anything, you know, I was still kind of learning what I wanted to do. I ended up changing my major to criminal justice because computer science didn't work out. But it was professors like Professor Darian who taught me, like, even if something is history, you know, it never changes. But I say this all the time, I had learned so much in one semester in Professor Darian's history course than I did all of middle school, all of high school, and then just learning stuff in the military. And it was kind of that learning that he kind of instilled on us as veterans that kind of kicked me in the ass to keep going. Because there's been many times where I just want to stop. I just want to quit. I'd rather be working, or I'd rather be doing something else than going to school. But I think it's the drive that I have to continue to better my life and to continue learning that's kind of set me on the path to keep going.
So why criminal justice? Why computer science?
Computer science originally because I was very interested in computers. I'm pretty tech savvy and stuff like that. But I had never done any programming at all, so I was kind of thrown off by that. But I've always had an interest in being in the FBI and the CIA. But I can't do the FBI anymore because of my back. I wouldn't be able to pass the academy. So I chose criminal justice because I want to try and like seek out different avenues, whether it be Marshall, DEA, something else, some other federal agency. To get into any of those agencies, you have to have a minimum of a bachelor's, and having a bachelor's in criminal justice helps. But I've always been interested in like law, criminal cases and stuff like that. That stuff's always kind of interested me. TV shows like The First 48 Hours, stuff like that. I love those shows.
Would you say it was a similar interest to the interest you had with the military?
Yes, because I've always loved learning about World War I, World War II, and then going to war and seeing that myself and learning the laws, and like it's always kind of related to each other in a weird roundabout way, regardless of the topic. Yes.
So, on the topic of being in classes and wanting to just constantly tunnel vision on learning, that you need to learn, would you feel like that makes you more or less capable than the students that have just come out of high school, despite that they have that knowledge fresh on their mind and they can do trigonometry just because their pre-calc said so?
Oh, trigonometry. I think it helps me more because they have the knowledge to fall back on. They can crash course and they can, you know, study overnight for a test or whatever. But I am generally interested in learning now. When I was 18, I don't think I would have been, you know, interested in coming to college and learning the way I am now. Just because I think because I'm older and I'm more mature now, I understand what the real life has, and like I have real life experience now. And I understand what life is going to be like after college. And so just floating your way through college with C's and D's and stuff like that, that's not going to help you once you get out of college. So I think with my ability to, you know, just be able to learn the information and trying my best to get good grades, it's going to end up setting me apart and helping me in the long run.
Which is also a very interesting view.
Yeah.
As somebody in that age group. So, your military experiences, you've said they've had a great impact on your life, and they've clearly had a great impact on your ability to work as a student and work as just in any type of situation. How flexible did it make you, or how much did it hold you back in a way?
It held me back actually, because like I said, in the military you become stuck in your ways. And so with college is easy. All it is time management. In the military, that's the number one thing you learn in the military is you have to be on time, 10 minutes early. I'm always 10 minutes early for everywhere I go, doesn't matter. And time management is the biggest thing in the military. And it directly relates back to college. College is easy if you manage your time easily. If you know you have a project do in a month. Why not start it a week or 2 weeks out and, you know, slowly build up so you're not killing yourself the night before. That's all it is. So I think in that aspect it was really easy, but I think getting used to what is essentially the college life is what made college more difficult.
So why Salem State?
I originally had actually applied to UMass Lowell and I was accepted there, but I had found out through my sister-in-law that the veterans program here was one of the best in the country. And then I had called the veterans program that they had at UMass Lowell, and I had heard terrible things about the veterans program at UMass Lowell. And so even though I had been accepted to UMass Lowell, I was like, I'm still going to apply to Salem State. So I applied to Salem State, heard back a month and a half, 2 months later, and was accepted. And I was like, now I have the choice of deciding which, you know, based on what classes I wanted to take in the vet center. Ultimately, the decision came down to Salem State has one of the best veterans programs in the country. And that truly helped me transition from military to civilian, back into the civilian world. I don't think I probably would have fared so well at UMass Lowell if the veterans program wasn't here.
So, as a nice way to like simmer it down and simmer back into a way, would you, if you had the chance to go back, start everything all over again, would you have done everything the exact same way you did?
Military-wise, or just life in general?
Everything. Military, school, everything included.
I mean, everybody has a few things they'd probably change, but honestly, probably not. And I kind of attribute this to my old to Master Kim in Beverly. If he had not fired me, I would have never joined the Army. And then if I had never joined the Army, I would have never been to sniper school. I would have never gone to Europe. I would have never gone to Afghanistan. I would have never probably gone back to school and get a bachelor's and eventually start working on my master's. So I look at one life event changed the rest of my life. And would I change it? I don't think I would. Maybe getting hurt changed that, obviously, but I don't think I'd change any of it.
So as a way to finally just wrap this up, I'm incredibly interested in why you decided to be a part of this project.
As I had said earlier, you know, there's a big thing with veterans is our mental state is people don't understand us, and that's why I think a lot of veterans shut people out. People don't understand what we've gone through. They can't relate to us. So I think the biggest reason I did this was because I want people to truly realize and understand that just because what I've experienced in the Army, what I've seen, what I've done, does not mean I'm a terrible person, does not mean I'm a horrible person, or does not mean that, you know, I'm a psychopathic killer or anything like that. I'm just a normal, everyday person who's had a different lifestyle than an 18-year-old kid. And without doing this project, people aren't going to know that. So you have to answer these questions to make them public and to get people to realize and start talking about the issue of, you know, veterans need help. And that's one aspect I think people really need to learn.
All right. So this was an amazing interview, and I would like to thank you for coming out here and for working a part of the project with Professor Darian, myself, and everyone else involved. And that just about wraps it up.
Thank you.
Thank you.